Should we legalize medical marijuana? And should there be a market for human organs? These are just a few of the things that we'll be covering in today's video. Hi, I'm Manpreet. I'm a medical student at the University of Birmingham and a presenter here at the Aspiring Medics. Today we're going to go through 10 key medical ethics questions. And again, if you haven't done so already, please do like, comment, subscribe down below.
Station 1. Evaluate the following statement. If patients cannot consent to confidentiality, their medical information can be shared anywhere.
So confidentiality is a cornerstone for medical ethics. It ensures trust and it also protects patients' autonomy. And the main principle of confidentiality ensures that we can't share patient information unless we're ethically or legally obliged to do so without their consent. And there are a lot of cases where this is the case. We have to share information without their consent. And when we do this, we have to ensure that we're doing this in their best interest. We're following the right ethical frameworks to do this. And finally, we need to be aware of the implications it may have on the doctor-patient relationship. In terms of making sure that we are making these decisions in a patient's best interest, I saw a really good example of this at my work experience at a GP placement, where a patient came in to the GP surgery and she was experiencing suicidal ideation, thoughts of self-harm, very severe thoughts of self-harm, and she was a sole caregiver to her young son. And the GP had to inform social services of this situation because the son would be at harm if the mother was to go back home. And although the mum did not want her information or her data to be shared with social services, we had to do this in order to protect the child and herself as well. So we need to make sure when we are sharing patients' information without their consent, we are doing this in the best interest of whether that be their family members, themselves, or the public in general. Additionally, when we are doing this, we need to make sure that we're following the right legal frameworks to do so, such as the GDPR, which makes sure that patient data is kept securely. And finally, it's imperative that when we are sharing patient information without their consent and they are aware, like the situation I saw at the GP surgery, that it does have effects on the doctor-patient relationship. The patient might not be as trusting of the doctor, they might be very upset, understandably so. However, we have to do things in their best interest. So overall, confidentiality safeguards trust and it does protect patient autonomy. However, there are cases where we have to override a patient's consent sometimes in order to safeguard other people.
Station 2. Is it unethical to share unverified medical information online?
Sharing unverified medical information can cause a lot of harm since it leads to misinformation. And misinformation has several consequences, such as leading to public harm, damaging trust, and how it goes against our professional duty. In terms of doing public harm, spreading false data can lead to widespread issues, like we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, where there was a lot of information circulating online about how the COVID-19 vaccination led to a lot of side effects, how it worsened your health, and how it caused other diseases. And this unfortunately led to certain pockets of people across the country not uptaking the vaccination, which led to their health worsening and reduced the effectivity of herd immunity as well. Additionally, misinformation can also damage patient trust. So for example, in the 90s, there was this false journal published about how the MMI vaccination led to autism, and this was proven wrong. However, it led to a lot of patients in the future further down the line not trusting healthcare professionals and doctors since they previously advocated for content that wasn't true. And finally, spreading misinformation or using unverified medical information goes against our professional duty as healthcare workers, as doctors, where we need to provide the most evidence-based, reliable information to give to our patients so they have the best healthcare outcomes possible. So overall, it's very unethical to use unverified information, medical data, since it can damage patient trust, it can cause public harm, and finally, it goes against our professional duty.
Station 3. Should medical marijuana be restricted for any patient groups?
So medical marijuana over the past few years has shown to have a lot of therapeutic benefits, particularly for conditions like MS and epilepsy, where marijuana is shown to control a lot of the muscle-related problems that they come with. However, it can be argued that we need to make sure to regulate the use of marijuana and restrict it for particular age groups or particular patient groups as well. And these groups are children, patients with mental health disorders, as well as for high-risk professionals as well. In terms of children, regulating the use of marijuana would be very beneficial since the children's cognition, their neuronal networks are still developing, and introducing them to medical marijuana can have an adverse effect on their cognition and on their brain function in general as they grow up. Additionally, by introducing medical marijuana for children who do need it can mean that they may go down the route of using recreational marijuana, and this can lead to addiction and can be very hard to rehabilitate as they grow up. And finally, if these children were to continue using marijuana for recreational purposes, it can open doors for more dangerous drugs such as crack cocaine and heroin as well. Additionally, we can also argue that it should be restricted for patients with mental health disorders, since medical marijuana or marijuana is known to be a risk factor for conditions like schizophrenia, and therefore introducing these patients to medical marijuana can mean that we worsen their side effects. We can worsen their psychosis, their anxiety, which can lead to even more problems. And finally, we can also say that it should be restricted for high-risk professionals, and these are professionals like healthcare workers who are in charge of taking care of other people, teachers, or professionals who work with large equipment and large machines, since it can impair cognition and potentially endanger other people as well. So overall, I do think it's right for us to restrict the use of marijuana for a lot of age groups, since it can pose a lot of risks and it can have negative consequences. However, it should be regulated, and we need to make sure that if we do end up using medical marijuana for more conditions, it needs to be based on a lot of clinical evidence.
Station 4. Should experimental treatments be performed on patients with severe mental health disorders?
So experimental treatments always raise ethical concerns, but this might be more of the case in this scenario where the patients have very severe mental illnesses. The main points for doing the experimental treatments, well, the main one is that we might be able to make breakthrough treatments, breakthrough interventions that can potentially cure these people and cure people like them as well. And the main points against are that we need to be able to gain consent from these patients. There needs to be very thorough ethical guidelines in place. We need to balance the uncertainty, and we need to justify the clinical value that this may add to the patient's disease progression. The patients involved in this experiment need to be able to consent to their treatment. They need to be fully aware of the risk and the benefits that they will experience by taking these treatments, and this might be harder in this particular group of patients since they have this severe mental illnesses, which means that they're more vulnerable to being exploited. They might be more easily coerced into doing these experiments. Additionally, we also need to make sure that there's very robust ethical guidelines in place when carrying out this experiment. Since this group of patients, they may be more prone to complications or more side effects, so we need to have these in place to protect them as well. Furthermore, we also need to justify the clinical value that this experiment may add. So this means that there needs to be prior evidence in place to make sure that the treatments that they will be getting in this experiment do have some form of benefit to them. And finally, we need to balance the benefits of potentially making breakthroughs with the risks that come with worsening their health or not having any impact on their health. So overall, experimental treatments do require a lot of oversight, and this is particularly the case for this scenario. And I do think that it can be ethical given that the patient can consent and they do have capacity to consent, and given that the benefits outweigh the risks in terms of this experiment being able to add some sort of value to that particular mental illness and its disease progression.
Station 5. What are the ethical implications of a regulated market for human organs?
A regulated market for human organs can increase supply, particularly for chronic conditions when organ transplant is the only way. However, there are lots of implications or ethical implications that can come with this. The main ones are to do with how it can reduce fairness to access, how it can exploit a lot of individuals, and on a lighter note, it can actually reduce illegal trade as well. In terms of fairness to access, by having a regulated market, it means that wealthier individuals may have better access to these organs since they have more money. And this means that more vulnerable individuals or poorer individuals who also need these organs may not actually have access. Additionally, this also might mean that the market may be saturated to only these wealthy individuals, which means that there might actually be a shortage for the NHS as well. Furthermore, there's also the exploitation risk that may come with a market for organs, where certain individuals who are facing a lot of financial struggles may feel pressured to sell their organs to make ends meet. And finally, on a better note, by having a regulated market for organ trade or for organ purchase, it might mean that we reduce the illegal trade that's seen in the black market. This means that patients would be able to have access to safer organs or organ transplants, and people might be able to sell their organs in a better, safer environment where there's a reduced risk of getting complications and side effects. So overall, having a very regulated market for organs means that we can increase supply, we reduce the illegal trade of organs. There are also the risks of exploitation that need to be addressed, as well as making sure that everyone has fair access to these organs.
Station 6. What are your thoughts on positive discrimination in medical school admissions?
So positive discrimination is where certain individuals are favoured for positive reasons. And this has been the case recently in medicine to address the historic inequalities that students have faced. Students who have been female, students who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and students who come under the BMAT category as well. And there are lots of benefits that come with positive discrimination. However, there are a lot of negatives that come with positive discrimination as well. The main benefits with positive discrimination is that it has a lot of wide benefits, it promotes diversity, and it promotes role models. And the main negatives with positive discrimination is that it goes against the pillar of fairness to some extent. So the main idea behind positive discrimination is that it promotes diversity, since we're able to let individuals from all different backgrounds, from all different races, socioeconomic groups, get admitted into medical school. And again, it fights against the historic inequalities that we have had in medicine. Additionally, it also promotes role models from diverse backgrounds, and it leads to aspiring medics from all sorts of backgrounds similar to the ones of these role models. And finally, having a very diverse group in medical school means that we're producing doctors and healthcare workers who come from all different types of backgrounds, and it reflects our society as well. And this can mean that we have a more holistic approach to care, and we potentially have better healthcare outcomes as well. However, the main negative behind positive discrimination is the idea of fairness, or how we're going against the idea of fairness, where we might be discriminating against individuals who are equally as competent, and we're discriminating against them because they come from a different socioeconomic background, they are white, etc. Additionally, we might also be undermining the merit-based admission process for medicine, where we're undermining the importance of academics over meeting quotas for admissions. So overall, I do think that positive discrimination is a good thing, since we address these historic inequalities again. We're able to let in all different individuals from different backgrounds into medicine, and we're letting them study medicine as well. However, we really need to balance it with making sure that we're not discriminating against students who are equally as competent but just come from different backgrounds as well.
Station 7. Should corporations bear a responsibility in addressing the obesity epidemic?
So corporations, particularly fast food chains, they do market and produce a lot of product available for people, which tends to be unhealthy on the whole. And therefore this raises ethical concerns in terms of whether they should bear responsibility when it comes to tackling this obesity endemic. So the main points that we can argue that they do have responsibility is the fact that they profit a lot from this, and they market a lot of these foods. And the main reasons that we can argue that it's not solely their responsibility is that at the end of the day, individuals are responsible for their own health, and that this is a public health matter. Fast food chains and fast food companies, they profit a lot from this food that they market out. They make a lot of money by giving these potentially unhealthy foods to to people, and therefore we can argue that they have ethical responsibilities to mitigate the negative impacts that these foods may have on patients, and therefore they do have responsibility when it comes to tackling complications of these foods such as obesity. Additionally, a lot of these corporations are in charge of advertising and marketing a lot of these junk foods, particularly for children. So therefore, for that reason, since they are in charge of what these individuals see and therefore what they consume, they again have that responsibility on that end. However, we can argue that it's an individual's responsibility at the end of the day in terms of what they consume, what they put into their body. So ultimately, it's not really the responsibility of these big corporations. Additionally, we can also say that it's up to the government to enforce standards and enforce regulations in terms of what these corporations can or cannot do. So therefore, ultimately, it's the government's role when it comes to tackling this obesity endemic. So overall, I can definitely see that how it's both the corporation's responsibility as well as the government's responsibility when it comes to tackling this obesity endemic. And I think by working together, by enforcing certain standards and regulations in terms of what food is available to what age groups, we can definitely tackle this endemic properly.
Station 8. Is it ethical to travel to another country to volunteer without necessary skills or cultural understanding?
The main implications are that these individuals may not be aware of cultural norms, they may not have the right skills, and the solutions that they come up with may not be sustainable in the long run. However, it can be argued that these are done with good intentions, and there can be a lot of community input in order to tackle the ethical problems that volunteering abroad does raise. The main problem is that individuals may not be aware of cultural norms, cultural behaviours, and they risk actually being ignorant and damaging these particular cultural customs that they may not be aware of. Additionally, these individuals that do volunteer in these different countries, they may not have the right skill sets for that particular project, particularly if it's at a medical centre, for example, where they might end up being more of a hindrance as opposed to a help. And finally, the problems that they do tackle and the solutions that they do come up with, they may not be sustainable in the long run, since these individuals are only there for a few months to a few weeks. However, like I said, we can say that these volunteering projects are done with a lot of good intentions, and they do actually have a decent amount of positive impact within that community. And additionally, in order to tackle these disparities in being aware of these cultural norms and these disparities in not having the right skill sets, these can be addressed by a lot of community input, by these individuals seeking help from professionals prior to the project, or talking and working a lot with the individuals within the community in order to understand the right norms and the right cultural behaviours as well. So overall, I do think that although there are some ethical problems around not having the right skills and not being culturally aware, these can be addressed prior to these projects, and these projects are actually very useful and beneficial.
Station 9. Is it justifiable to reduce patient care services to prevent staff burnout?
Balancing patient care as well as staff well-being is very important in this particular scenario. By our staff being burnt out, it impacts the quality of care that they can deliver. And by cutting services, it impacts patient care, since these services are going to get overbooked and patients are going to receive a delayed treatment for their healthcare, which is going to lead to further complications and worsened health outcomes overall. So on the whole, no, I don't think it's justifiable for us to cut services in order to improve staff well-being. However, there needs to be measures in place where we can both balance staff well-being as well as patient care, and there's a lot of ways that we can do this. The main one being addressing systemic issues that are leading to this and focusing on long-term gains. The main systemic solutions that we can look at can be things such as improving funding, so staff don't have to work very long hours, which can lead to burnout, or improving staff wellbeing services in hospitals so that they have better support so they don't end up being burnt out. Additionally, this would mean that we're looking at the long-term gains and the long-term benefits as opposed to more short-term means like cutting care, which would lead to worsened outcomes anyway. The main main long-term gain is that by promoting staff well-being, by looking at systemic issues, means that they have better health in the long run, and therefore they can give better quality care in the long run as well. So overall, this particular notion I don't think is ethical, since we would damage patient health. However, there are ways that we can address this issue without having to cut patient services.
Station 10. Why is there a legal obligation to ensure patient information stays confidential?
So confidentiality laws protect patient privacy, they maintain patient trust, and therefore it's a legal requirement in the UK. So these laws, they protect patient privacy since they safeguard very sensitive patient information, such as their phone numbers, their house addresses, from being misused. And these laws also prevent data breaches with strong guidelines and regulations, such as having double authentication for all the devices being used to hold patient data, as well as measures like healthcare professionals not being allowed to take sensitive patient information home with them. They have to stay in hospital. Additionally, these laws, they also maintain patient trust. They help build rapport, and they improve doctor-patient relationship. So for example, at my work experience at a GP placement, a patient came in wanting to talk about their sexual health problems, and they seemed very nervous to begin with. However, the doctor said something along the lines of, "Don't worry, everything in this consultation is strictly confidential." And this allowed the patient to ease up, and they were able to open up about their sexual history, and the doctor was able to elicit a full history from them. So we can see here that this allowed for the doctor to build trust, and therefore build a good rapport with the patient. So for these reasons, it's a legal requirement in the UK to have these laws in place, like the GDPR, to ensure compliance. So overall, confidentiality ensures trust, and it protects patients, and therefore it's a legal requirement.